If you say the word front row motorsports, the only thing you're probably going to think of is David Reagan's Talladega win in 2013, or maybe Chris Buescher's fog-shortened win at Pocono in 2016, or even recently, Michael McDowell's 2021 Daytona 500 win. But even still, front row motorsports has managed to snap lightning in a bottle with wins that are few and far between, but never been able to capture these wins consistently. And they've all come from different scenarios, in different rules packages, and with different drivers chasing them behind. So how did front row motorsports do it? And how did they even get to this point? To start off, we have to talk about Bob Jenkins. In terms of the financial aspect, he's been the man that's helped them throughout that, as he owns a plethora of food brands, including the likes of Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, KFC, and many more. From 2004 to 2005, his racing entity was not actually his. It was Mach 1 Racing. Mach 1 Racing was a startup team that failed to make it throughout the NASCAR's big ranks. And from 2006 to 2008, Jenkins would take over and form Front Row Motorsports. With various drivers, most notably Chad Chaffin and John Andretti, he would try and qualify for at least many races, but failed to qualify for as many races as he made in. Even still, there really isn't much to talk about. Yes, they had manufacturer support from Chevrolet, and yes, they occasionally had that top 35, but other than that, it was pretty much engine failures and transmission failures galore for the team. They wouldn't really hit it big until they would hire John Andretti full-time for the 2009 season. And this is the first chapter of Front Row Motorsports. John Andretti managed to make his way into the Daytona 500. So, for a starter, that's at least good. And in the Daytona 500, he would finish a solid 19th. The team's top 20 would be their first top 20 in the team's existence, and so it was a step in the right direction. And from Auto Club all the way over to Richmond, they would have fairly abysmal finishes. However, the team had reeled their way out of the top 35 realms, and were creeping their way into top 20s and top 25s, and occasionally the top 30. At Richmond, they would finish 32nd, in Bristol they would finish 34th, and Martinsville 35th. So their short track program was pretty bad. But in terms of their mile and a half program, at Las Vegas they finished 28th, and at Texas they finished 26th. So they were making a step in the right direction. However, what happened after Richmond was that John Andretti had to race in the Indianapolis 500. I mean, he's an Andretti, so it's pretty obvious. Tony Raines would take over, and at Darlington he would have a finish of 25th, and at Charlotte he would finish 39th. And unfortunately, the entire rest of the season would pretty much be like that. Finishes of top 30 and top 25. Their only good performances came at New Hampshire, where they finished 16th, and California, where they finished 19th. But all in all, the team would finish 35th in the point standings. This was back when the top 35 rule was implemented. So, finishing in the top 35 in the point standings this season was a win. It was way better than what they were doing before. And so, the future looked good for Front Row Motorsports. I'm not going to say it was bad, but I'm not going to say it was the brightest future. They were just going to have to see what they can do in 2010. Now this is the point in Front Row Motorsports when things get confusing. They have various part-time drivers driving in various races throughout various circumstances, and none of them really did anything memorable, except one or two of them. And the main drivers here are David Reagan, David Gilland, Tony Raines, Josh Wise, and John Andretti. A little bit of him. Now we'll start off with John Andretti. Andretti made his final start in the 2010 Daytona 500, and in this he would finish 38th. It would be his last NASCAR start ever, and this was also the point in time when Front Row Motorsports began their alliance with Roush Fenway Racing. Thus, they would switch to Ford, which they've stayed to this very day. For Tony Raines, there really isn't anything memorable here. He would have a 19th place finish in the Daytona 500 in 2012, and that's about it. And as for Josh Wise, there really wasn't anything smart about hiring him. He would have a best finish of 19th at, yes, a plate track, Talladega in 2013. Now let's talk about David Gilland. Gilland drove for Roush Yates Racing for a number of years, and was a fairly good driver. He even got a pole for them in the 2007 Daytona 500, so it's not like he was a bad racer by any stretch of the imagination. But after Roush Yates Racing dissolved, David Gilland found himself without any real ride. He would drive part-time and start and park rides for the majority of 2009, and entering into 2010 with Front Row Motorsports, he would drive for the team start and park as well. However, in 2011 in the 34 car, he would have finishes of 3rd at Daytona, 9th at Talladega, and would finish 30th in the point standings. and during his time at Front Row Motorsports from 2012 to 2015 in the 38, he would have a finish of 2nd at Talladega, 7th at Talladega, and a best points finish of 26th in that same season in 2013. But 2013 was way more memorable than just David Gilland doing well. But before we talk about why that season was memorable for Front Row Motorsports, we have to talk about David Reagan. David Reagan was a replacement to Mark Martin, a legend of this sport that never won a championship. Reagan, from his time in 2007 to 2011, really did nothing for the organization, and was often the scapegoat next to Jamie McMurray in a lot of the conversations. In fact, at the end of the 2009 season, because Roush Fenway had 5 cars, they needed to kick out one of their drivers. And the question wasn't about Greg Biffle or Matt Kenseth or Carl Edwards. It was really between David Reagan and Jamie McMurray. Even though McMurray got booted from the organization, and David Reagan had 2 more years to really prove himself, it wouldn't go as well. I mean, he would get his first career victory at Daytona, but it's Daytona of all places. Anybody can win there. After his Roush Fenway racing stint ended, he found himself going to Front Row Motorsports, which was the most likely place. I mean, Front Row Motorsports had an alliance with Roush, so going here wasn't completely out of Roush's stretch, and if he wanted to go back to Roush, he could. From 2012 to 2015, when he raced for the organization, he would have a best finish of 1st at Talladega.
It's a race from here on, no matter what happens.
Johnson looked high, Kenseth to draft with Edwards, Johnson to the bottom, Almirola to the top.
Man, Matt got shuffled out again.
Jimmy Johnson with Carl Edwards, but Kenseth up the middle, coming back, help from David Reagan, up to the bumper of Carl Edwards, Reagan in the middle, his teammate Gilland is the pusher, they're right on the bumper of Edwards, is there anywhere to go? Reagan to the bottom, Gilland with him, David Reagan, July winner at Daytona a couple of years ago, Gilland with him, Edwards up top, Michael Waltrip to help, and here they come off turn 4.
Push, boys, push! Push hard!
Edwards high, Reagan comes up, Carl on the spot.
Gilland got it! He's got it!
Front row racing is in the victory lane at Talladega. Reagan first, Gilland second. How about that?
Oh yeah, baby, yeah!
While that finish was good for him, and while he would have a best points finish of the organization of 28th, his final race for the team was in the 2015 Daytona 500. He would finish 17th, which was solid, and a good top 20. And that's really the name of his entire career at Front Row Motorsports, just a top 20 to top 25 driver most weekends. He wouldn't really race for Front Row Motorsports again because he would get an opportunity with Joe Gibbs Racing and Michael Waltrip Racing, which would lend him an opportunity in 2016 for BK Racing. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves here. Because in 2015, they would hire a plethora of different drivers. I already mentioned David Reagan's Daytona 500 stint, but the following weekend, it would be Joe Nemechek. And then it would be Brett Moffitt. Brett Moffitt is really the most important case to talk about here, as he drove the majority of the races in that season. At Las Vegas, in his debut for the team, he would finish 37th. And he would finish 34th in the point standings, or at least the team as a whole would finish 34th in the standings. He would have a best finish of 27th at Daytona, and again, it's Daytona of all places. Front Row Motorsports Super Speedway package was extremely good, and at this point in this video, you probably are already coming to that conclusion. However, entering into the 2016 season, they would go with a fresh new lineup. Out with the old of David Reagan and David Gilland. In was Chris Buescher and Landon Castle. Now, Chris Buescher, leading up to this point in time, was not a bad option by any stretch of the imagination. He was a Roush developmental driver, and so to hire him in Front Row Motorsports was kind of a win. What was Roush Fenway Racing going to do with him? Kick him out of the organization after 2 years? Buescher had won the championship for the team in 2015, and Roush really wanted him desperately to be part of their organization. But because they didn't have any room, Chris Buescher had to go to Front Row Motorsports, which is basically the feeder team to Roush Fenway Racing. As for Landon Castle, however talented he may be, he would have a best finish of 11th at you-know-where, Talladega, and would finish 31st in the point standings at the end of the day. With finishes of 16th and 31st in the point standings, it wasn't looking good for Front Row Motorsports, as it was one of their worst finishes, yes, besides the 32nd they had the previous year. So entering into the 2017 season, they would bring back David Reagan, alongside Landon Castle. David Reagan from 2017 to 2019 was, again, a semi-subpar driver. He would have a best points finish of 26th, and would have a best finish at the team of 6th at Talladega of all places. While he would finish 16th in the Daytona 500, he would once again finish 31st in the point standings. This caused change for Front Row Motorsports. and in 2018, they decided to hire Michael McDowell. Now, Michael McDowell had been driving for various part-time teams over the course of his career, so much so that I really couldn't even cover it in a video. But his most notable stint was with Levine Family Racing in the 95. And with Levine, he was making steady improvement. He also had an Xfinity Series win and Road America to his name. So, he was a fairly talented driver. He was a good road course racer, there was no doubt about that. And that's why he was hired as to be part of the organization. Plus, it was a breath of fresh air for Michael McDowell, as he had never really driven for a full-time ride except for the Levine Family Racing ride. And Michael McDowell proved his abilities. He was good at the road courses and the plate tracks, and from 2018 all the way up until now, that was the story of Michael McDowell. And Michael McDowell was increasingly getting better at Daytona. Finishes of 9th in 2018, 5th in 2019, save for a 2020 finish of 14th, he would win the 2021 Daytona 500. Capturing Front Row Motorsports' third and to date last career win.
They come down to block. Logano goes back up. Keselowski with him. McDowell in tow. Dillon on the bottom.
The run's on top. Oh! Teammates.
Around they go in a hard crash. Kyle Busch.
Kyle Larson.
Caution is out.
Bubba Wallace is in this. Austin Cindric. Hard hit by Kyle Busch. Caution's out.
McDowell is first to the line.
Pulled ahead of Chase Elliott.
And Michael McDowell from Glendale, Arizona, for Bob Jenkins Front Row Motorsports, has won the Daytona 500. How about that?
As for David Reagan, he would retire shortly thereafter at the end of the 2019 season. But he wouldn't completely leave Front Row Motorsports, as he would continue to drive in the third car only for the Daytona 500, where he would finish 4th in the 2020 Daytona 500. So Front Row Motorsports was left with a revolving door of drivers. They had John Hunter Nemechek throughout the 2020 season, who actually impressed a lot of people by finishing 9th at Darlington, 8th at Talladega, and 28th in the point standings. And while his summer slump had a lot left to be desired, John Hunter Nemechek still proved he was a talented driver. And while he went back to the Toyota developmental system to either make or break his future, they would end up hiring Anthony Alfredo for 2021. Now, Alfredo is 21 years old. He didn't even run a full Xfinity Series schedule, so I doubt they're probably going to keep him for the long term, but in the short term, he is a fairly good pick. He keeps the nose clean, and he's a good driver to have in the organization. When all of this is said and done, what do you think of Front Row Motorsports? Do you think they're a good team, or do you think they're a bad team? What do you think is the future of Front Row Motorsports? Let me know in the comment section below. Until next time, this has been the news. I'll see you.